The stars weren't supposed to twinkle in this quadrant, but there they were, glitching, flickering, looking suspiciously like they were laughing at him. Captain Elias Vance, commander of the SS Rustbucket, a name chosen with equal parts shame and irony, sat hunched in the pilot's seat, muttering to his ship as if it might respond better to guilt than diagnostics. "Just make it to Zarna 5, you said. Quick haul, you said. No pirates, no void worms, no spontaneous plasma leaks. Sure. Great plan." The ship coughed in response, or something deep in its coils did. Possibly a raccoon-like creature nesting in the vent system. He hadn't checked. Frankly, he was afraid to. A flicker pinged across his control panel. Faint, pulsing. A distress signal. Standard galactic pattern, repeating every 3.7 seconds. He leaned in, squinting at the readout like it might decide to disappear if he blinked. It was coming from a dustball planet below, uncharted, probably uninhabited, probably toxic, probably covered in things with too many limbs and a preference for human spleen. He exhaled. Nope, not my problem. The ship buckled, the lights blinked out, and gravity briefly forgot which way was down. Okay, fine, he grunted, flipping every lever he could reach. Maybe, mildly, my problem. The planet's surface came into view through the grimy cockpit glass. Bronze sandstorms, jagged black rock formations like claws rising from the ground, and in the middle of it all, the silver crescent of a crashed ship. Smoke drifted lazily from its hull. The signal repeated, asterisk help, injured, immediate assist required, will pay. He locked onto the coordinates, mumbled something that might have been a prayer or just a string of curse words, and began descent. The landing was about as graceful as a rhino on roller skates. He bounced twice, slid sideways, and hit a rock that made his cup holder eject with startling force. But when he stepped out into the metallic sand, the wind howling like a choir of offended grandmothers, he saw her. She was crawling, half draped in shimmering robes that looked more like ornamental window dressings than survival gear. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and shimmered faintly like moonlight trapped under glass. Her hair had a purplish tint, drifting in the wind like it was underwater. Elias raised an eyebrow. Well, definitely not local. She blinked at him with wide, iridescent eyes, then opened her mouth and said something that made his translator choke and crash. Right. Okay, hold still. Don't die. I've got probably a med kit somewhere, or duct tape. She tried to rise, wobbled, and promptly collapsed into his arms. Her scent was weirdly pleasant, like burning citrus and static electricity. He decided not to question it. He carried her back to his ship, trying not to notice how fragile she felt, or how her fingers, curled lightly around his jacket, pulsed faintly with bioluminescent light. Back in the ship, he laid her on the cot, rummaged through his locker for something sterile-ish, and pressed a scanner to her forehead. The display blinked. Unknown species, vital signs, alive. Barely. Recommend not panicking. Thanks, he said to the machine, then muttered, helpful as ever. She stirred. Her eyes fluttered open and focused on him. And then, with a rasping whisper that nearly made his heart stop, she said, you are beneath expectations. He blinked. You're welcome. Then she passed out. He sat there for a while staring at the unconscious alien wrapped in his emergency blanket, wondering what exactly he just picked up. Royalty? Fugitive? Galactic influencer with terrible flight skills? Note to self, he said aloud. Next time, ignore the blinking light or invest in a nicer blanket. The ship hissed as the stabilizers kicked in again. Something sparked behind him. Probably fine. Probably. She woke up during breakfast and immediately tried to dismantle the toaster. Elias had barely taken 2 bites of his synth oats, mildly edible, vaguely cinnamon-flavored sludge, when he heard the high-pitched ding of the galley's ancient toaster being unscrewed with astonishing speed. I was going to offer you toast, he said, turning around with a spoon still hanging from his mouth. But I see you've opted for elective surgery instead. The alien woman, still unnamed, still glowing faintly like she had swallowed a disco ball, held up a copper wire and peered into the appliance. This device speaks in frequencies, primitive, but poetic. It hums when idle, like a nervous diplomat. Elias blinked. That's not inaccurate, but it also makes toast. She glanced at him, then back to the toaster, clearly unimpressed. You feed from it? Only emotionally. He took the wire from her gently, pried the toaster from her grip, and set it back on the counter with the kind of care one usually reserved for venomous snakes or unstable fuel cells. She watched with a mixture of curiosity and horror, the way one might observe a sentient marshmallow trying to pilot a battleship. He handed her a bowl of synth oats. She poked at it like it might detonate. I believe this is glue, she said after a long pause. High in fiber, he said. Helps keep your internal organs on speaking terms. She sniffed it, then sniffed him, then the spoon. You survive on this? Survive is a strong word, he replied. Persist is more accurate. Occasionally regret. She tried a bite. Her face went very still. This is a war crime. He grinned. Welcome to breakfast. They sat in awkward silence for a few moments, her robes slightly smoking where they had brushed the heating vent, his jumpsuit stained with yesterday's mystery fluid from the coolant pipes. She glanced around the galley like someone taking inventory before deciding which part of the room to judge first. Your vessel is asymmetrical, she finally said. Yeah, the port stabilizer's drunk. And that odor? Ambiance. She tilted her head. You live like this on purpose? He shrugged. Not on purpose per se, more like prolonged negligence with artistic flair. She let out a short sound. It might have been a laugh, or a cough, or a small animal being compressed. Either way, it was the first sound that hadn't been criticism or galactic insult. Elias leaned back in his chair, watching her carefully. She looked better now, less pale, less translucent, more annoyed. Name? He asked. She hesitated. Virella. He waited. She kept hesitating. He blinked. Is that it? No house of something? No Lady Virella of the glimmering whatsits? She blinked back. You wouldn't be able to pronounce the full designation. Your tongue is too floppy. Elias took that in stride. Floppy tongue. Got it. Add it to the list of personal failings. She frowned. I do not mean to insult you. Merely observe. Oh, I'm used to it. My ex once said I walk like a distracted giraffe, and I still dated her for 3 months. What is a giraffe? 6 meters of confused elegance. Virella considered this seriously, then nodded. You seem the type. They lapsed into silence again. The toaster hummed just to feel included. Somewhere in the walls, a rodent-like creature made a noise that sounded like it had learned to curse. Elias stood and tapped the control panel on the wall. A small hologram of their quadrant flickered to life. All right, he said. You crashed, you were half dead, now you've insulted my ship and my cuisine. Next step? She stood too, taller than him by a head and more poised despite the fact she was wearing a blanket like a royal cape. I must contact my people. They will wish to know I yet persist. You mean your family? She hesitated. In a manner of speaking. He raised an eyebrow. You a big deal or something? She didn't answer, just smiled in a way that made the lights dim for a second. Right, he muttered. That's comforting. As she walked past him toward the cockpit, she paused, reached into the folds of her robe, and placed a gemstone the size of a grape on the table. It pulsed gently like a heartbeat. Then she continued walking. Elias stared at it. You know this still doesn't make up for the toaster thing, right? Elias was halfway through recalibrating the ship's inertial dampeners, by which he meant banging the panel with a wrench and yelling at it, when he realized she'd been standing behind him for at least 5 minutes. I require your vessel's comms, Virella said, with all the casual menace of someone ordering an orbital strike. He jumped, dropped the wrench on his foot, and yelped. You gotta start announcing your entrances like a normal person. Maybe a bell, or a trumpet. She tilted her head. I do not sneak. I simply exist in silence. That's somehow worse. He limped over to the comm panel and gestured with an overly theatrical bow. Behold the mighty communications console. It can contact 8 systems, confuse 5 more, and insult at least 3 in binary. Virella ignored him. already tapping the controls with precise, dancer-like fingers. Symbols flickered across the screen in a language Elias couldn't read and had no plans to try. He figured the fewer galactic secrets he accidentally absorbed, the lower his odds of waking up duct taped to a chair in someone else's interrogation room. He watched her out of the corner of his eye, the calm in her movements, the flicker of gold under her nails, the way she whispered into the panel, as if afraid the air might betray her. Not for the first time, he wondered who exactly he'd let into his ship, or why the comm console just offered her 16 encryption levels that had never existed before. After a moment, she stepped back. The panel sparked, fizzled, and politely powered down, as though exhausted. "Done?" Elias asked. "For now," she said, "though I believe I just declared a minor war." He blinked. "You? What?" She smiled. "They'll get over it. Or not. It depends on whether they want to keep their moons." He gave a long, tired sigh, then resumed hitting the dampener panel with a defeated sort of hope. "I really need to start asking for passenger IDs." She sat down on an overturned crate with all the grace of someone who'd once attended galactic banquets. "You saved me," she said out of nowhere. "Most wouldn't have." "I didn't exactly have a lot going on that day," he muttered. "Just a thrilling conversation with a leaking fuel valve and an argument with my ship about ethics." "She speaks? She judges." Virella regarded him with that same unreadable look she always wore, like she was analyzing the structure of his soul and finding the scaffolding poorly designed. Then she said, "You're braver than you look." "I look brave. You look like you got lost on your way to a plumbing convention." He threw the wrench across the engine bay. It bounced off a wall, hit a ceiling pipe, and released a puff of steam that smelled like burnt sugar and poor decisions. Elias coughed. "Fine, I'm brave adjacent." Virella stood and walked to the viewport, hands clasped behind her back. Outside, the stars crawled by in slow, deliberate spirals. She didn't say anything for a while, just stared, like she was looking for something that had slipped between them. He joined her, arms crossed, shoulder barely brushing hers. "So, you're important, huh?" "I used to be." "That gem you left on the table, worth much?" "Only if you want to buy a continent." Elias blinked. "You're joking." "I rarely do." "You should try it. It's how we inferior beings survive the crushing weight of existence." She smirked. "I thought that was bread." He snorted. "Fair." They stood there in silence again, long, comfortable, strange, like the quiet that comes after an explosion, when you realize you're still alive and probably hungry. Eventually she said, "There will be people looking for me." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Good people?" "Ambitious. That's code for armed, isn't it?" "In multiple dimensions, yes." He sighed again. "Right. I'll reinforce the shields and, maybe paint the ship a different color." She looked at him. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not asking questions you already know you shouldn't." He nodded. "Old habit. Learned it from a toaster." "Wise machine." "Oh, extremely. It tried to unionize once." She laughed. This time it was real. Light and surprising, like a melody played backward that somehow made sense. And somewhere, deep in the belly of the rust bucket, the ship let out a low groan. Elias wasn't sure if it was mechanical failure or mild jealousy. Either way, he was starting to worry this was the beginning of something wildly out of his pay grade. Elias knew trouble had arrived the moment his docking request was approved with a complimentary beverage. "Something's wrong," he muttered, adjusting the rust bucket's approach vector. "This place is either a trap, a cult, or they're just too polite." From behind him, Virella observed with the amused expression of someone watching a hamster drive a spaceship. "Hospitality is a symptom of deeper schemes." "You're not helping." "I'm agreeing." "Well, stop that. It's unsettling." Twellin Station loomed ahead, an aging orbital platform shaped like a flattened spiral pretzel. Once a military hub, now a neutral trade port for merchants, smugglers, and the occasional runaway monarch. Elias had visited it twice before, once to buy a hyperdrive stabilizer, and once to apologize for accidentally flirting with the customs officer's pet. The ship docked with a reluctant clunk, followed by the unmistakable sound of something important detaching itself from the hull and committing suicide in space. I should get that checked, he said, powering down the engines. You won't, Varela replied. No, I won't. The station's customs AI greeted them in a pleasant voice that sounded suspiciously like it had been trained by someone who smiled with their teeth too much. Welcome to Twellin Station. Please declare your purpose, species, and whether or not you've recently committed a war crime. Elias replied, trading. Human. Define recently. The terminal beeped approvingly. Varela stepped beside him wearing one of Elias's spare jackets, now modified with a self-healing nanoweave and an unreasonable number of zippers. She looked like a pop star trying to go incognito in a junkyard. They stepped into the main atrium, and Elias immediately regretted everything. He was being bowed to. Not a lot, just a few people. Subtle, but still actual bows. One man dropped his coffee. A kiosk bot sang a welcome jingle that sounded eerily like a royal anthem if it had been produced by a budget-conscious DJ. Varela kept walking like this was normal, which Elias now feared it was. I'm going to ask a stupid question, he said under his breath. Why is everyone looking at you like you're a miracle wrapped in velvet? Because I am, she said. I was hoping for a more humble answer. That was the humble version. They made their way through the crowd, trying not to trip over floor-cleaning drones, aggressively polishing tiles already at a blind your retina shine. Varela paused by a vendor selling genetically modified fruit and, without saying a word, took a small purple berry from the stand. The vendor's eyes went wide. Elias reached into his pocket. I'll pay for... The vendor shook his head violently and whispered, No, 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 no. Please take more. Elias blinked. This berry isn't going to explode, is it? Only with joy, the vendor squeaked and promptly offered him his entire cart. They fled the scene before someone threw a crown at them. In a quieter corner of the station, still gleaming, but less judgmental, they found a noodle bar with exactly one stool and a host who looked like he'd seen everything twice and hated it both times. Elias slurped his broth. All right, I need an actual explanation. No riddles, no metaphors, just plain galactic basic. Varela leaned on the counter, propping her chin on her hands. I am the primary heir to the Kalari conglomerate. He froze mid-slurp. I don't know what that is, he said. She sighed, then pointed to the chopsticks. These were manufactured by Kalari. So was the bowl, the spoon, this station's hull, that advertisement hologram featuring a singing mollusk. Elias turned slowly, realizing that nearly every visible brand had the same three-diamond insignia, cleverly disguised in different fonts. Oh, he said. Oh, no. Yes, she said. You're that heiress? I was. And now? Now I'm eating soup with a man whose ship has a ceiling held together by hope and chewing gum. Hey, Elias said, that's premium-grade gum. She smiled again. This one was softer, less world-dominating. They ate in silence for a bit longer. Then she whispered, They'll come looking for me. Elias leaned back. I figured, they'll want me back, for reasons. Let me guess, the kind that involve dynastic responsibility, arranged mergers, or some kind of evil space board meeting with glowing chairs. Essentially, yes. He rubbed his forehead. And you left because I got tired of being a name on a throne. I wanted to be someone. Somewhere, maybe eat something that wasn't diamond-wrapped caviar. He looked down at his half-eaten noodles. Well, mission accomplished. She bumped his shoulder lightly. You mock, but this is better. Than being rich. Than being alone with it. The noodle vendor sniffled quietly behind them. Elias muttered, Great. I've made a space princess cry. Again. Not crying, she said. Sure. Shut up and pass the soy sauce. He did. And just outside the noodle bar, 3 tall figures stepped off a gleaming diplomatic skiff. Each wore suits too polished for this part of space, and each one had a photo of Elias in their hand. Elias had faced a lot of things in his life. Hull breaches, plasma storms, a worm that tried to sell him insurance. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared him for being politely interrogated over soup. The men were tall. Their suits were a shade of corporate gray so precise it probably had its own legal team. Their smiles were smooth and their hair suspiciously motionless, like it had signed a non-disclosure agreement with gravity. They didn't so much enter the noodle bar as materialize. "Captain Elias Vance," said the one in the middle, tapping the image on his holopad. "Would you mind stepping outside?" Elias slurped his noodles louder. "Actually, yes, I mind quite a bit." The man blinked. "We represent the interests of the Kalari conglomerate. You are in possession of—" "I'm not in possession of anything," Elias said, "unless you count a slowly dying starship, 3 packets of emergency peanut paste, and several regrets." Virella didn't move, didn't flinch, just calmly picked up her napkin and wiped her mouth. "You're very far from your usual orbit," she said without looking at them. The men shifted slightly. The air between them got tighter. Or maybe that was just Elias realizing he was now sitting between 1 runaway heiress and 3 walking lawsuits with lasers. The lead suit said, "Virella, your presence is urgently required. Your grandfather has questions." She raised an eyebrow. "He always has questions. Most of them begin with, 'How dare,' and end with someone losing a moon." Elias muttered, "I think I liked you better when you were just mysteriously glowing and possibly radioactive." The suit took a step forward. "This man has interfered with conglomerate affairs. He will be escorted to—" "Oh, no," Elias said, raising both hands. "No escorting. I've had enough escorting to last a lifetime. Last time someone said escort, I woke up in a casino missing my boots and half my liver. I'm very attached to this liver." Virella stood, just like that. One moment seated, next moment radiating enough pressure to make the noodle bar's lights flicker. She placed one elegant hand on Elias's shoulder. "This man," she said clearly, "is under my protection." The suits hesitated. Elias whispered, "Is that a real thing?" "It is if I say it confidently enough." "Ah, good. I love improvised laws." The middleman's expression didn't change, but his voice got very precise. "You are still a citizen of the Kalari conglomerate, Virella. You are not above recall." "I am outside recall," she said, "in case you missed the part where I left and stopped answering the family crystal." Another suit opened his mouth, thought better of it, and opted for a throat-clearing noise that sounded vaguely bureaucratic. "We will inform the board," the lead one said eventually. "They will not be pleased." "They never are," she said, "but they love a good tantrum." The men turned and left in unison. Elias suspected they had practiced that, possibly at some secret training facility where elite operatives learned synchronized smoldering. When the door slid shut, he exhaled. "So, that went well." "You didn't faint," Virella said. "That's progress. I'm considering doing it now, retroactively." She resumed her seat, took another bite of noodles, then looked at him with something gentler than amusement and sharper than affection. "You're not safe anymore," she said. "Oh, good. I was worried I might be." "They'll come back," he nodded, "with more men, bigger suits, sharper smiles, better hair somehow." They sat a while in silence, the noise of the station murmuring outside. Somewhere a janitorial drone whirred by, singing a song about hygiene and vengeance. Then Virella said, "We should leave soon." Elias poked his bowl. "Before or after dessert?" "Do you have dessert?" "Number. But I like to pretend the idea exists." She gave a small laugh. "You're a strange man. And you're a runaway trillionaire with a talent for starting wars with a smile." They clinked glasses, hers full of fizzy green liquid, his holding the last of the broth. And in a shadowed corridor 2 decks below, the lead suit was already speaking into a communicator, his voice thin and cold. "Yes," he said, "they're still together. Prepare the executor." Pause. "No," he said, "the one with the really good hair." The first warning sign was the coffee machine. It sputtered, blinked twice in protest, and began dispensing an unidentifiable liquid that hissed as it hit the mug. Elias stared at it with growing concern. This is either an espresso or the beginning of a very polite assassination attempt. Virella leaned over the console, sipping something carbonated and purple. "You upgraded it with alien tech from a salvage crate labeled possibly sentient." "It had a smiling sticker," he muttered. "I trusted the sticker." The coffee steamed, and then growled. Elias stepped back. Okay, that's new. Virella poked the side of the machine with her spoon. The growling stopped. She took a sip from his mug. Vanilla. That's a war crime. Before he could argue with her palate or file a formal complaint with the Intergalactic Barista Council, the proximity alarm blared. Not the low, lazy beep of casual space junk. This was the kind of alarm that said, brace yourself, and also maybe write a will. Elias dropped the mug. It hissed, skittered, and attempted to flee under the table. He hit the display panel. What am I looking at? Virella leaned closer. That's a Kalari Executor-class retrieval ship? Why does it look like a knife made love to a threat? Because that's precisely the design philosophy. He squinted. It's got, 12 engines? 14. One is purely ornamental, but it's tax deductible. The screen flickered and an image appeared, clean-cut, chiseled, and disturbingly handsome in a way that suggested genetic sculpting and an intense skincare routine. The man smiled. Virella, he said, voice smooth as synthetic silk. Darling, Virella stiffened. Varun, Elias blinked. Wait, you know this guy? She didn't answer. Varun continued. It's been too long. You've been terribly missed, especially by the board. And your fiancé? Elias coughed hard enough to accidentally elbow a cabinet. Fiancé? Former, Virella snapped. Technically current, Varun replied with a wink. You never submitted the disengagement contract. Very messy. Legally speaking, Elias muttered. You people have forms for breakups? 17 forms, 3 blood samples. A performance review. Virella stepped forward. You shouldn't be here. Varun tilted his head. You shouldn't be there, playing space cowgirl with a man whose net worth is probably negative. Elias raised a hand. Excuse me, I have socks with holes. That counts as equity. The executor ship rotated slowly in the viewport, reminding everyone that it had missiles and opinions. Varun's smile didn't waver. Come aboard, Virella. Let's be reasonable. I promise a full buffet, the good kind, with those little gelatin cubes you like. Elias whispered, Okay, that does sound nice. Virella didn't move. Her voice was quiet. If I come with you, will you leave him alone? No. Elias sighed. I figured. Varun's image blinked out. The executor powered up. Elias turned to Virella. So, options? She checked her wrist console. Well, I can hack their targeting systems, blind them for about 30 seconds. He nodded. And in those 30 seconds, we run like cowards. My specialty. They bolted for the cockpit. The rust bucket groaned as Elias flipped every switch he could find, including one labeled, Don't. The ship lurched. Alarms sang. One of the wall panels ejected a motivational quote in Esperanto. Virella's fingers flew over the console. Disruptors offline. Temporarily. I hope, Elias whooped. You hope? That's like saying a grenade's probably decorative. Behind them, the executor roared to life. Ahead, the stars blurred. And between them, with the laughter of chaos in his chest and an alien heiress clutching the dashboard like it owed her money, Elias realized something deeply disturbing. He was having fun. The rust bucket shuddered as Elias wrestled with the thrusters, which at best had a rebellious streak, and at worst might have been trying to develop sentience, or a caffeine addiction. Virella sat beside him, arms crossed, the picture of galactic royalty turned reluctant co-pilot. Do you have any idea where you're going? She asked, her voice both amused and mildly exasperated. Sure, he said, fingers flying over worn controls. Anywhere but there. He jerked the yoke sharply left, narrowly missing an asteroid that looked like a disgruntled space potato. She chuckled. A potato with attitude. Exactly. The alarms on the dashboard sang their shrill aria, mostly ignored now, like background music at a space flea market. Elias felt a bead of sweat roll down his temple and hoped it was just dust. Virella leaned forward, eyes flicking over the blinking consoles. If we can reach the Indigo Verge station, the exiles there might provide cover. They aren't exactly known for strict customs. Elias grinned. Exiles, like space outlaws? Think of them as people who got tired of the board's tea parties. Sounds cozy. Don't be fooled. Cozy is a dangerous word in their vocabulary. Their banter was interrupted by a loud ping. The targeting system lit up. The executor was not only still behind them, but had apparently grown new weapons. Oh, good, Elias muttered. They've upgraded from polite threats to, please don't kill us lasers. Varela smirked. We might need more than luck. Luck? Elias scoffed. I prefer the please, 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 not this again strategy. They dodged and weaved through a dense meteor field, Elias yelling directions like a man trying to herd cats. Varela handled the communication systems, sending out scrambled signals that confused their pursuers and incidentally caused an older model mining droid to start broadcasting space karaoke. Elias laughed despite himself. Bet that droid has better pitch than I do. Which isn't saying much, Varela teased. Your rendition of the ancient Earth ballad, Space Cowboy, still haunts my dreams. Only because you secretly loved it. I may or may not have been mildly entertained. The chase stretched on, stars blurring into streaks as the rust bucket pushed beyond its limits. Then suddenly the ship jolted violently. Hull breach, Varela guessed. Worse, Elias grunted. Some poor engineering, a corroded fuel line, and the kind of luck that would make a black hole jealous. Lights flickered. The emergency gravity field wobbled like a toddler learning to walk. Elias braced himself. On the bright side, he said, this gives me a good excuse not to clean the engine room for at least another week. Varela rolled her eyes but smiled. You're hopeless. They worked together, patching leaks with improvised tools and bantering about the improbability of their situation. Elias realized something surprising. Despite the chaos, he was enjoying this. Maybe for the first time in years. As the stars stretched out before them, Varela said quietly, You never treated me like an heiress or a target. Elias glanced at her. Because you're just a passenger who happens to glow in the dark. She laughed, and it sounded like the kind of music that made dying stars pause and listen. Maybe, she said, being just someone is enough. He nodded. It is. At least when you have someone to share the mess with. The rust bucket limped onward, a battered ship with an unlikely crew, racing against fate and the galaxy's endless appetite for drama. And somehow, amidst the broken circuits and stolen moments, they found something rare, a fragile, stubborn hope. The rust bucket, patched up with everything from cosmic duct tape to Varela's uncanny knack for temporary fixes, drifted into the quiet orbit of Indigo Verge Station. Elias flipped switches with the practiced air of a man who knew most of them were probably broken, but hoped the ship agreed with the plan. Varela, bundled in one of his two large jackets, stared out the viewport like she was seeing home for the first time. Remember when this was just a junk heap with no working gravity? Elias asked, scratching his neck. Now it's our fortress. She smiled, eyes reflecting distant stars. And a rather comfortable one, considering. The station was a haven for the galaxy's misfits, exiles, thinkers, robots with questionable ethics, and at least 3 philosophers who'd never agreed on what a chair was. It was loud, unpredictable, and perfectly imperfect. Elias took a deep breath. So, what now? You rebuild an empire? Go back to royal tea parties with laser cutlery? Varela laughed. Number, I've decided I'm done being a trophy. I want to be a person. Flawed, annoying, occasionally barefoot, but mine. He grinned. That sounds terrifying. Terrifyingly honest, she said, linking her fingers with his, and strangely comforting. Their days settled into a rhythm that was part chaos, part discovery. Elias taught Varela how to fix a leaky fuel line without causing an explosion. She taught him how to negotiate with a cantankerous android who insisted his poetry was better than most humans' love letters. One evening, as they sat under the cracked dome of the station's observatory, sharing a meal that might have been edible, Varela pulled out the gemstone she'd once tried to use as currency. I don't need this anymore, she said, her voice soft. It's just a rock. Elias raised an eyebrow. That rock could buy you a small planet. She shrugged. I've got something better now. He looked at her, heart strangely full. What's that? A place where I'm not running. And someone who doesn't run from me. He laughed. I'm surprised you stuck around after the lost my boots and half my liver incident. Your charm is disarming, mostly dangerous. They laughed together, the sound echoing in the quiet vastness. Virella stood, looking out at the stars that had once seemed so cold and unreachable. The galaxy is vast, she said, but it's less lonely when you have a companion. Elias nodded. Besides, someone has to keep the rust bucket from turning into space confetti. She smiled. Together? Together. The stars blinked overhead, indifferent yet somehow approving. Two travelers, once strangers from different worlds, had carved out a small corner of the universe where laughter, friendship, and the occasional misadventure were the true riches. And as the rust bucket hummed softly beneath their feet, Elias knew one thing for sure. The greatest journey wasn't across the stars. It was the one they were on together.